Alright, we are here taking a quick look at War of the Worlds. This game is an Xbox Live arcade game. This was out a little over a week ago, and it's an interesting 2D platformer. Before we get into that though, let's take a quick listen to Patrick Stewart and kind of the intro of the game, which definitely gives you a good feel for the narration of the game and how the storytelling goes.
To the inhabitants of Mars, we must have looked like germs under a microscope. But we were so blinded by our vanity that we could not imagine the possibility of invasion. It started on May the 23rd, 1953. The date has become as important.
So that gives you kind of a basic idea of how story is given to you. Obviously, having Patrick Stewart is amazing. I wish he could just tell me stories all the time. The beginning there with a train is kind of neat. You could see there was some neat lighting that was going on, and even into this first scene here, you can see in the background with the smoke and the special effects. It's kind of neat, you know. And so when I first started it, I was like, well, this is going to be fantastic. This is right up my alley. It reminds me of the game Limbo a little bit, which came out about a year ago. Which was easily one of my favorite games. It was just so amazing. At how much it was able to do with so little. It was so minimalistic. And I feel like they're kind of going for that same approach with War of the Worlds. But let's talk about some of the things that initially put me off about it. This game, I don't know if you can see the animation and the way that the character animates. He gets into very specific animations, and it's very obvious that they were inspired, the developers were inspired by the game, and they've said as much, Flashback and Out of This World. And those two games were pretty amazing at the time, and they still are amazing actually, and they used what was called a gyroscopic animation system, which made things look a little more fluid and a little more natural. And you can see here, they're kind of hearkening back to that with their animation system they have in place. The problem is this, is that from one animation to the next is a little bit too jarring. It's a little too canned. It's not quite as natural. Plus, technology has quite simply come too far, and games look too smooth. Even 2D platformers like this, the technology is there for it to look quite a bit smoother than it does. So while I absolutely love their inspiration, it doesn't quite fit together for me. Now, talking about the Patrick Stewart part, which is again amazing, this is very much a trial and error game. So, there you see I just died. This is obviously the very beginning of the game, so there's much harder stuff, later on. But when you're doing trial and error, okay, I died there, there's times where you're going to keep triggering Patrick Stewart. So the first time or second time you hear him give you some of the story is fantastic, but when you keep dying and you hear the same piece of audio 10 times, 15 times, you just want Patrick Stewart to shut up. Very annoying. This is very much one of those things where you have to get everything lined up just perfectly to make a jump, to solve a puzzle. So it's interesting in the way they want. I think in theory it's interesting how they want to present the story to you, and how you're going to continually progress it. But I think the gameplay itself and the trial and error elements to it kind of take away from it. I can't quite put my finger on why this doesn't feel that great to me and why Limbo did, because Limbo was a trial and error as well. But there is something about it that just doesn't quite fit, and a lot of the times I feel like it's just looking at the player and the animation. They have this kind of live thing they're trying to do so it looks like a real person. It just doesn't quite fit. I think it falls a little bit flat, and playing about 10 to 15 minutes of it, that was kind of my first take on the game. Initially I was really wowed, but then when you start getting into the trial and error, it's just super, super frustrating, and I'm not sure how rewarding it really is. So that's it. That's it for the quick look. I'm going to let it play a little bit longer, but that's my first take on War of the Worlds.